Welcome back to the show again, Dan Beaver, who will hopefully help me get out of my fantasy racing funk. How you doing, Dan? Oh, hopefully Dan's there. Dan,
Hello?
Can you hear me? Hello? Maybe not. We'll try it again. Let's see here. Is Dan there? Can you hear me?
Oh, man.
Try that. No. Hey, Dan, can you hear me?
I am here.
Okay. There he is. Okay, sorry about that.
Sorry about that.
Sometimes things just don't get plugged in the right way, I guess. But anyhow, I don't know if you heard me, but I said I am in quite the fantasy funk at the moment, and you're the guy that's going to hopefully help me out of it.
I'm not sure that Bristol is the right place to try to get out of a hole, but we'll do our best.
Well, me and Jimmy Johnson are both going to be trying to continue to get out of holes, so it's a real trick.
If you can perform like Jimmy Johnson, especially if you can perform like Johnson has in the past at Bristol, you got a pretty good shot.
Of course, Dan is one of the fantasy racing experts for Yahoo Sports, and he's the resident fantasy racing expert at NASCAR.com. Dan, when you go to Bristol, do you look at Bristol sort of the same way you look at the restrictor plate tracks? Is it a true wild card, and do you maybe not use your number ones there?
It's considered a wild card, but I don't know that that's really all that fair. A lot can happen at Bristol, and like the restrictor plate tracks, nobody races there for a long time without getting some significant damage. Matt Kenseth, Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon, they've all crashed within recent memory. But the cars can take a lot of damage these days. And a driver like Kyle Busch, who can rattle off 4 wins in the space of 5 races, that proves that this doesn't fit in that same category as Bristol, or as the plate tracks. You can get on a roll, you can stay out of trouble, and even if you get into a little bit of trouble, you can overcome it, so long as you've got the right stuff.
Dan, how far back do you go when you're trying to put together, a retrospective or a look at, when we go to Bristol? The racetrack has changed over the last 3-4 years. Do you only use that amount of data from when the track was repaved, or do you go back even farther to see how drivers did on that track before that change of that particular venue?
A lot of fans have expressed concern that Bristol went to progressive banking. They felt that it pulled the teeth of the track. But I don't know that Bristol's any different today than it was before. You do have more side-by-side racing. You have less bumping and running. But what's required to go fast there is still the same today as it was before. You've got to charge the corners hard. You slow down a little bit in the middle of the corner, and then you nail the accelerator off. And so long as you keep doing that, the drivers who have that perfect mix of patience and aggression are going to be the ones that succeed there. So the answer to the question is I think you go back as far as you need to. If you're looking at Kyle Busch, you go back to 2006, and he's been strong ever since. If you're looking at Brad Keselowski, you only go back a race or two, and that's how you handicap him.
Okay, well, looking at the Yahoo game, which is, I think, probably still the most popular NASCAR fantasy racing game out there, Dan, how will you line your team up this week? At this point in the week, I know you may make changes as practice comes around, but how are you looking right now?
The Rosketeers are strong at Bristol, so I think you've got to look at Edwards and Kenseth again. They both have long streaks of strong runs. They've both been extremely dominant in the past. Edwards' second place finish last year came after he spent the last 70 or so laps racing in second. Kenseth, as recently as 2005, spent 415 laps in the top 10, and 7 of his last 8 races there have been, 415 laps in the lead back in 2005 for Kenseth. 7 of his last 8 races have been in the top 10. So in Group A, I think I'm going to avoid the drivers that a lot of other people are going to look at, Stewart, Johnson, Jeff Gordon, and I'm going to be concentrating on the 2 Rosketeers. In Group B, I think it's time to roll the dice a little bit. I think Keselowski's going to be real high on my list. He only has one top 10, but that's a victory from last August. And I think he's got the same personality as Kyle Busch. He loves to attack every corner. He's got the youth and the stamina to stay up there. So he's going to be one of my top picks in D. And in C, if it was any place else, if it were any other game, Brian Vickers probably wouldn't be very high on my list because Bristol is not one of his better tracks. He picked kind of a bad weekend to come back to the series. But with so few options in C and needing to extend the picks for Eric Almirola, David Reagan, Bobby Labonte, I think Vickers gets a second look, even a third look in Group C at Bristol. He's probably going to be good for a 20, top 20. He's rested. It's a good team. Mark Martin's been doing extremely well in that car, and I think Vickers will do a little bit better than his average finish.
Do you look at Brian Vickers in that car kind of as having to prove something as well, and that could lead to his ability to get a better finish maybe than what he might have done in the past?
Needing to prove something is often a double-edged sword. I think that's part of why Brendan Gaughan has crashed in the last two races. So it depends on how the driver responds to the pressure. Vickers is up to it, and I don't think that Vickers is going to race over his head. So in this case, having to prove something I think is going to be a benefit to Vickers. It's going to give him that little bit of an extra edge. But since he didn't rush into a car at the beginning of the year, I don't think he's going to rush into trouble at Bristol.
Well, Dan, we only have a couple minutes left. If you were picking in a game like a one-and-done type of game, who would your pick be this week to win at Bristol?
Got to be Kyle Busch. He's had only two bad runs in the last since 2008. Actually, he's only had two bad runs since 2006. And he has 5 victories in that space of time. He's won 4 of the last 6. If Kyle Busch isn't on your roster, and I guess he might be my pick for Yahoo Group A, come to think of it. If Busch isn't on your roster, then he should be.
All right. I don't know if we still have Dan. We might have lost him.
You still there, Dan?
Yeah, I'm there. I was just listening to myself reverb there.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
All right. Sorry about that. Before we let you go, real quick, we wanted to ask you about our 64 team tournament. We still got our play-in game, and you get to choose between Danica Patrick and Louise Smith using whatever criteria you wish.
You got to go with Louise Smith. The lady wrecked her family car and had to deal with her husband when she got back home. So that was a tough lady. I think you gotta take Smith.
All right,
there you go.
We got some strong Smith support tonight.
Dan Beaver, yeah, we got a couple of votes for Louis Smith. Dan, thanks very much again. He is Dan Beaver. He's NASCAR fantasy racing expert for Yahoo Sports and NASCAR.com. Follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Race. Read all of his stuff. If you play any of these fantasy games, you really need to get his insight. Dan, thanks again for your time. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
I appreciate it. I'm here and appreciate it, and I'm all of Twitter for Bristol.
All right.
All right.
Good job. Thanks, Dan.
All right, Dan Beaver.
All right, you got to make your choice.
Oh, I got to pick somebody, don't I?
Yeah, that's the way this whole thing works.
Pick for Bristol.
Pick for Bristol.
I'm taking I'm taking Denny Hamlin.
Denny Hamlin. Mm-hmm. All right. I am going to take Carl Edwards.
Okay.
Not a Roush-Keteer that was actually mentioned, I don't think, by Dan, but part of the Roush-Keteer group.
He is.
So I will go with Carl Edwards.
And I took the Kyle Busch.
there you go. The Kyle Busch.
I thought I almost picked. I was this close to taking Kurt. That's what I was stumbling on.
Yeah,
I just can't do that yet.
I think you made a wise choice. Thanks to Michael Annette, who was on tonight, Patrick Donahue, Mike Embry, Landon Castle, and, of course, you heard Dan Beaver. Thanks to all those guys for being with us. Thanks to Beth Ann for doing all the work over there.
NASCAR Media for all the video and several of the photos that we featured during the show today. Thank you.
All right. And make sure that you come back next week because we'll do this all over again with a whole new cast of semi-characters. This is On Pit Road.
The fastest show on Ustream TV.
You've just been on Pit Row, and now you're up to speed with the best information about the world of NASCAR.